on my computer that says to do that. Their work includes ongoing analysis for Fortune 100 brand Mass Mutual, as well as for the largest public higher education provider in the nation, Arizona State University. O.Y.E was recognized last year as an outstanding small business by the Phoenix Business Journal. Eric has worn many hats throughout his professional career. In 2007 and 2008, he was in Shanghai, China, serving an important supply chain development role to support exponential company growth in the region for Staples Inc. Eric completed his master's degree in finance at Northeastern University in Boston and obtained a marketing degree from the Ohio State University, and has a passion for helping people. That is absolutely for sure true. He sure does. So thank you, Eric, for sharing your time and wisdom and expertise and experience with us. One of the things that Eric had shared with me that I was really interested in talking about when it comes to racial equality and diversity in business these days is a study that was done by O.Y.E on the Black Lives Matter movement. So I wanted to see if we could start there. Maybe you could share some information with us on what you guys found out.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll share it briefly, and but really quick, I'll just give just a brief intro on it. So the research we did. So we use our software, and we kind of simplified the name. And I should have briefed you on that, Becky. We just call it O.Y.E now, just so everybody can pronounce it nice and easily. But O.Y.E, basically we use it to analyze what do multicultural consumers, primarily African American and Hispanic consumers, say about any topic. So really, we did an analysis in early June. So the insights I'm going to show you are a little bit older as regards to the civil rights movement of this year, in that they came from early June. So a lot of this stuff we know about now, as far as like what some of the donations and some of the programs that were started by some of these big companies that we were researching. But really, it was just like, hey, this is going on right now in response to the murder of George Floyd. How are companies opening their purses or not opening their purses, and how is the African American, how is the Hispanic consumer reacting to that? So we looked, and generally when O.Y.E does our social listening, we generally grab data that comes from any public available resource, such as Instagram, Facebook, but primarily our sources are really Twitter and YouTube. So the majority of this conversation, just because of the nature of public data these days, is really coming from Twitter. So the majority of this conversation is actually coming from Twitter. But let me share my screen. I'll just give you a quick look at that, and then I think we'll just look at that for a few minutes, and then I think some of that will kind of help as we lead the discussion and go into some questions and responses. But basically, so what we did with O.Y.E is we looked at the Black Lives Matter movement, how companies are taking action, and basically what we did is we identified 8 of the brands that were doing the most at that point. So a little hard to read, I understand, on the graph, but basically at that point, the ones that were making the biggest noise, and noise as far as like being mentioned on social media for the things that the tangible actions that they were doing, giving money or really making announcements publicly, were Airbnb, Ben & Jerry's, Netflix, Nike, Starbucks, Target, TikTok, and YouTube. So all of those, in general, when we look at conversations such as that generally white American conversation is going to be around 75%, 80%. And that's the same for this, as this is the conversation that was definitely national. With all ethnicities were talking about these conversations. When we focus in, the insights we really go into the most, primarily are Hispanic conversations and then African American. So we looked and we saw that the conversations that were driving the most Hispanic conversation, or the brands that are driving the most, were Nike, for example, followed by Ben & Jerry's, Netflix, and then YouTube. And then with African American, also Nike was the highest. However, it wasn't a lot lower. It was only 8%, followed by Starbucks, Ben & Jerry's, and Netflix. We'll talk a little bit more about Ben & Jerry's because they have done a lot, and it's something that they've been known for since 2016, when they really they made their first announcement about racial inequities and the things that they were doing towards making a change. So this is not uncharted waters for Ben & Jerry's to be involved in this, and I'll show you a little bit more about that. But in this report, and at the end, Becky, I think we're going to share some of the links. I've got a number of links that are helpful for people that want to read more about it, or people that want to share any of this information. I'm going to share a link to this, and I've got 10 of, I've got a lot of stuff, to be honest with you, but I'm going to give you 10 of my best ones, I've curated for you that I think they're most interesting. I'm going to skip past some of this. Like a lot of this is just like our standard research, but I'm going to kind of go down to the things I thought were most interesting. As far as the age range, so for O.Y.E, we do age identification of folks, and the groups that were the most vocal, probably not surprising, 18 to 24-year-olds are actually the younger groups, are in that blue section right there. You could see how large the blue sections are. And this is, and the second largest group, I'll zoom that for a sec, are actually for most brands are actually the green section, which is the 35 to 44-year-olds. And so those groups are the most active. Is interesting because it actually skips the 25 to 34-year-olds, which is interesting to see. It's not always that way, and but that was in common with the African American consumers. In fact, what we saw for some brands, like you can see for Airbnb among African American consumers, it was as high as, I think we're looking at 68% was in the 18 to 24 year range. And there was also a really big section of the 35 to 44-year-olds that were talking as well. But so there were, and one of the things that we noticed as we look through this, and I'm probably just going to focus more as opposed to the graphs. I've got a number of tweets that I really think exemplify what people were actually saying. I think those are always fun to see, and they kind of personify what was being discussed. But there was a lot of commonalities between what Hispanic consumers and what African American consumers were saying about what the brand's actions were and what more they could do, or were they happy with the actions they were seeing. So let me just show you a few of those. This is something I saw was interesting. This was early on. This is June 1st. There was ways. This is a post by someone that says basically, how can they donate to Black Lives Matter when you have no money? And if you went on to see the link in the video, basically they're saying it's an hour-long video where if more people watch the video, they will generate more ad money. And because of that, the people that video was made for to contribute to, which was for the Black Lives Matter movement, would be benefited by more people watching this video and basically the ad dollars that go behind it. So it was interesting to see that type of post. And that was one of the reasons that while YouTube and Google did, and they have made, I guess, impressive donations and statements about Black Lives Matter, there was also mentions of YouTube, because a lot of people actually use that channel to share what else that you can do. Like this, I thought was really interesting. I've never seen somebody do basically a suggested donation that way, and I thought that was a fun one to see and kind of learn from. It was some of the youth were doing, definitely 18 to 24-year-old. Somebody that retweeted, this is posted but then retweeted by Blacks and African Americans. Let me show you a couple more in Spanish as well. So we have been seeing, and I'll get to this a little bit later on, but there's definitely more that the Latin American community can do. And I've actually been on podcasts recently where we talked about just that topic, and what do Hispanic consumers, how does a Hispanic audience react to Black Lives Matter? Are they fully supportive, or is there some of the, our lives matter too, or how does that work with the Hispanic community? So there's, it was nice to see that even in Spanish that we were actually getting support for Black Lives Matter, and actually how people could provide any of their own donations as well. So then there's, and then also Hispanics were also sharing, content. So when they see us, the story of the joggers in Central Park, something being shared in Spanish as well, about how you could educate yourself more about this, about the problem actually that we are currently living with. We've also got, now of course we're talking about the brands and what was the reaction by Hispanics and African American. So we actually do see that there was a lot of the content from, Airbnb, for example. A lot of people, it resonated with them that they're saying they're donating $500,000. So, by that point in June, we had moved past just doing the social post and just saying, hey, we believe in supporting Black Lives Matter. At that point, people were being called out, and companies were definitely being asked, well, show us your corporate diversity, show us what you're doing to actually make a change, open up your purses, all of that. And this is, I think, is something that Airbnb, among, as well as a number of the other ones I mentioned, there's a lot, and I've got full list of who's done what, and how many dollars and all of that stuff. And again, or actually, I do want to say it's not just about the dollars. I think there's a lot of different types of contributions or support that was given besides just dollars. But I think, obviously dollars are very easy to measure, so it's something that does stand out and does resonate a lot with the audience when they see it. And then somebody else saying similar, somebody, this is a Hispanic consumer seeing, what does Netflix doing here? Can we call out other $100+ billion companies to do more as well? And then just a couple more, and I'm going to cut back and we can go into the questions and answers, but just a lot of appreciation. So definitely you're seeing, natural reactions from Black and Hispanic consumers about what is being said. And this is just a handful. Like, there's thousands of these kinds of posts that are being seen about what Airbnb is doing. And then we've got some more colorful ones. I'll just end with two colorful ones. I'm not going to repeat them for obvious reasons, but basically, some people were very much more vocal and more passionate about what these companies are doing. So this one right here is about Ben and Jerry's, and like being much more than just saying the kind of the same rhetoric, but like really going proactively at what the problem is, and people appreciated that a lot. So Ben and Jerry's was extremely high in positive sentiment from our analysis, and that was something that we saw countless posts about what they were doing and how they've been doing it for so long. It's just not, for them, it's not just like the trend, let's get on that trend and be supportive. It's something that they've been doing for a while and they believe in. And then the final one I'll leave you with is something with Amazon. This is May 31st. So this is actually right before the data we started pulling, but I think this is the kind of post that was showing up all over Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Is like, people were just putting their brands were posting their Black in solidarity, just like Amazon, and people were saying, open your purses, and they're calling out specifically to these brands. So that's the type of thing that has been going on. And then obviously, this is, 6 weeks, 7 weeks old. So that a lot has changed since then. And I'll talk about that. I have some of the updated stats and, numbers on what's been done. And also some of the reactions, like I mentioned, we just been on a podcast recently, and we talked specifically about this with members of the Black community and what they were feeling. So I have some of those feedback as well. Becky, was there anything else that you think I should share from that presentation, or should we go back to the Q&A?
Oh, no, I think that's great. Actually, that's perfect. And we're going to share the link to go back to that overall report too, if people want to take
Sure.
a more detailed look at that. So one of the things you just mentioned that I think we wanted to talk about as well is what have you heard from the members of the Black community? What kinds of, what is the reaction to how companies have responded, just in general, or do you have some examples?
Plenty of examples, but so I was looking, and there's a lot. So I'm going to share with you guys, and I'll show you briefly on here in just a moment. I'll share my screen again and show you, but there is a lot of lists. And in my industry, I work in the marketing and advertising industry, so I follow specifically what marketers and advertisers are doing, like brands, how are they reacting. And so I'm sure there are other lists in other industries as well that, but I'm going to share with you the ones that I do have and I do know about. And they do mention a lot of the bigger brands that we knew of, like, like your Airbnbs, your Ben and Jerry's, your Netflix, is all of them. But when I was looking at the different things, the different responses that these brands were having, one of the trends I really noticed is that there was really 5 different types of response or like action that companies were doing. So one we already mentioned, which was cash, right? So if you put a dollar amount and you're going to put it towards supporting something, that's something that people can understand. But it's definitely not the only way. So there's 4 other ways that I saw that was really resonating with how brands were putting their support out there. Hiring initiatives, I think that was a big one that was really mentioned by some of the bigger companies. So specifically, the ones that I recall, and there's a lot, but Pepsi and Google both said that within their, I think it was their Black managerial representation, needed to be up to 30%. So, and some of those I believe included Hispanic and Black up to 30%, which I don't know if this is the way that they came up with that number, but that is roughly the same proportion of Blacks and Hispanics in the United States. But basically saying that, hey, we realize that there's a gap here between where we want to be and where we are, and this is going to be our goal. So hiring goals was, I would say, the second one that I saw a lot as far as like types of ways that companies were going to respond and take action to the Black Lives Matter movement. Besides that, supplier diversity. I think supplier diversity was a key one as well. So one of the ones I really liked that just happened recently was Sephora. Like Sephora said, hey, we are in the hair style, and so I don't go to Sephora much, so I don't know too much about it, but we are in that area where we have a lot of multicultural audience consumers. They come to us, and actually, one of the things that's really interesting in that area, and actually I'll mention Caress too in the same way, is that there is a lot of African American and Hispanic entrepreneurs in that world, but it's very hard for them to get funding, and it's very hard for them to land on a shelf in Sephora. So Sephora specifically said that 15% of their shelves are going to be dedicated to Black-owned businesses, which is huge. I mean, that's you're talking about a nationwide store. Being able to commit to that is really something that is a huge. It's more, to me, that means more than just a dollar amount, because that's like really investing long term in partners that can build their wealth through that partnership. Also, I would say the fourth one that I really noticed in that was actions. So one of the ones, and some of these were kind of like, oh wow, I didn't realize they still did that. For me, NASCAR removed all their Confederate flags, and that's kind of a duh moment, but that was still going on, and and that was something that did. So I think actions, it wasn't money, it wasn't one of the other things that we mentioned, but it was something very symbolic as far as action, like this needs to happen. And then finally, I think there was a lot of calls to action. So one of the groups in advertising world, it was called I believe it's 600 and Rising, and they issued a call to action for the biggest conglomerates that are the advertising, that kind of own the advertising world. So it'd be like your DDBs and your OMDs, Omnicons, and all of that. Basically, they said, we challenge you to release your diversity numbers within your board, within your managerial teams. Let's see those. And one of the companies released, I can't remember the name of the ad agency that did it early, but they produced that, and you could see that the numbers weren't great. They were under 5%, like significant. A lot of them were under as far as like 2%, as far as Black presence within the executive leadership. So basically, the challenge was, will you release your diversity reports? What's your current levels of managerial? And even a lot of them went above and beyond. They produced what was their hiring diversity among all their professional employees. Where was it at, and where do they want to be? So I think calls to action was really another one that I saw that was really one of the 5 different types. But there's literally thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of companies that have done in the United States that have done public announcement as far as what they're going to do. A lot of you guys probably work with companies that have done something publicly. I think every company I'm involved with has done something. Most of our clients have done something. So it's obviously something that is really has touched a lot of the businesses that we work with, and they've really been I guess challenged to do more than just put out the standard messages, hey, we support Black Lives Matter, but open their purse or do something a little bit more significant than that.
So how has the public responded to these things? Like I don't know how you can gauge what the response is to each, like one of these kinds of areas, or how do you find out about what the response is, the chatter on what that does?
So it's a great question. So one of the things that I saw as far as like what people were saying is like from the Black community that I've met with and talked about, some of the things that they've said are really the most helpful for them is that, for example, having that, basically, first of all, you got to own it. The company has to put out the numbers or say where they're at, kind of take that first initiative into saying, this is where we are, and this is probably where the problem is. We don't, hire enough people. We might have a bias in the way that we hire. We may not do any business with Black-owned businesses or Latinx businesses. So basically, first, that's one of the main things, is really just having it out there that there is a problem, or that this is where we begin. And then after that, you're gonna have response. So you got to be ready for what is your team gonna say, as far as, are they going to what are they going to want to do? Or they're probably going to ask you as a company, what is your plan to solve that issue? Or, what are your actions that are going to make a difference in resolving that? So you got to be open for that. And then I think some of the key things that I've heard from some of my colleagues, and so we had on our podcast, we had somebody on from it was the Urban League Young Professionals Group, actually in the Phoenix office. And they specifically said that the things that their company did was they had an open discussion about it. They had basically like a town hall where they all got to talk about what they saw as the issues within their own company. And then they actually produced a D&I board. And it's not a big company. So usually when you see D&I, diversity inclusion organizations, it's usually like, every time that I've worked with them, it's usually large companies like Fortune 500s. But I think of, even your small businesses, and I won't say how small necessarily, but I think a lot of companies would benefit from these. And, some of the things they looked at is like, if we do a D&I board, or if we do start a diversity inclusion, what are some of our goals? And, let's not just start one just to, basically have it out there and just like another kind of like a stamp or a checkbox, but like, what are some of the things that we can measure from it, such as, people diversity hires we can do, maybe internship programs. Can we proactively go out instead of hiring the same ways and just saying that we're going to hire more of the Black community? Well, the problem probably is that you're going to say, well, they're just not applying for our job. And a lot of that is because there's a systemic bias that basically is felt, and you actually have to be more assertive than that. You actually have to be more proactive. So that was some of the things that, I actually really appreciated learning and finding some of those tactics and what you could do. And some of that, there's Black job boards, there's specific like internship programs, things like that. There's things that have been shared a lot recently, and I have some of those resources myself that I'm going to give to you guys in the links. But there's a lot that can be done, but it starts with the conversation, and then actually being open to having those town halls, and just like being able to put some funding behind this. What are some goals that we can measure about how this initiative is going to make a difference? And those are some of the things that I've seen that have been, I guess, most effective so far.
Okay, that's awesome. And as people have questions, there's not a ton of us, so please, hop in or raise your hand, and then I will make sure to unmute you if you need me to. So what do businesses need to keep in mind, like going forward, when it comes to engaging with the community and being in support of this movement, as it's like changing? Like you said, it's been 6 weeks and things are changing so rapidly and going in so many different directions as we intersect with everything else going on in the world. But what do businesses need to keep in mind going forward, you think?
Well, I think that, it's changed. This is something that, for a while, I think it was thought, hey, this might just be another thing that blows over and we can go back to normal. Well, we've seen that really, everything with, I think coronavirus definitely helped that you helped the focus. And I think that, we're seeing a new normal, and now people have to be ready to be accountable and be able to show that. So now that we've seen the numbers, so like going back to the ad industry, now that we know that Black representation is under 5%, well, where are you going to be in 2021? So it's not something that's going to go away that easy, because we've already set the tone there. And like, if it comes off that this was something that was just done because it was a trend and everybody had to say they were doing something, then I think that's going to ring false, and people will bring that back up. I mean, obviously today in, social media age, things, I've seen lots of things from, companies, as I did my research, even, for preparing this discussion today, as far as, companies that have said they're in solidarity with Black Lives Movement, but then have done actions in the past that were, supporting, stand your ground rules that was responsible for killing Black youth in Florida and other things. So people are going to be called out in the future for things that if they don't really follow through with what they've said they're going to do. I think, there's other things, like some of the things that I saw is like, and I'll give you guys this article as well as, pet to threat. I think Black women, this is something that really just came up to me recently, was that, Black women have felt that, at first they're hired and they're basically like a pet, literally, like they're cute. There's something to be, have in the office, like, wow, look, we have diversity and inclusion. But once that Black woman starts to, grow in her profession, like learn her trade a bit more and wants to raise up the ranks, she becomes a bit more threatening. And that's what, we call it, or they call pet to threat. So pet to threat is something that, people need to be aware of, just that, things like that. I think we've also got a number of things such as like, the advertising jobs. One of the things that I noticed in, when we started to look internally at what my own company could do. So besides O.Y.E, we also have Nativa, which is an advertising agency. And for us, we realized, obviously we were studying this and what companies were doing. So we're like, hey, let's do our own tangible things. Let's do 4 things. Like we had a list of like 10 things, but a lot of them were kind of fluffy and we couldn't really break it down until like a substantive thing. So we did 4 things. And this is what I would encourage, any company that wants to do more, like have more of a purpose in regards to Black Lives Matter. So for us, the 4 things we did is, we recruit interns in 2 major markets. One's Columbus, Ohio, and one's in Phoenix, Arizona. And we tend to recruit in the same exact way every time. But we tend to get the same people we always get, and that's like something that, we never really thought about. And so we started thinking like, what more could we do? And so, basically, as my colleague had said, is, you have to proactively go out and look for them and be more inclusive. And, you can't just say, oh, well, they didn't apply for my job, but, there's issues with that. And, been proven that like, they don't, a lot of the Black youth and Latin and Hispanic youth too, and other groups come from minority, because from backgrounds that don't allow internet access, or they don't have the mentors that teach them, hey, you got to build your LinkedIn profile and all this stuff so you can apply for the jobs. So you have to go and be more active into finding them. So that's something that even us, I mean, we've always recruited Hispanic youth basically. But then, as we thought about it, I said, do we really need all Hispanic youth? And honestly, the main reason in the past has been that we needed bilingual speakers, but that's changed as we've evolved. We do more Black American, Asian American research. So that's something that we've realized that we could do more. So we've reached out to there's at ASU, for example, there's a Black American or Black African Student Coalition. And we reached out to them, and then there's similar groups at Ohio State that we've also reached out to. And those are things that basically we said we need to proactively recruit internships from there. So that was our first one. Our second one was in the area of purchasing. So there's all kinds of, we're a very small company, we don't have huge dollars to spend, but there are lists, locally in Phoenix, there's lists. And of course there's national boards. There's Black Wall Street is one that I've been using to find Black vendors, but just, everything from there, like instead of just by default giving our dollars to, if it's office supplies, giving it to Amazon or Walmart or something like that, trying to be more purposeful with, can we support a small business, a Black American owned business? So that's something that was another tangible thing that we were looking to do. Also, we wanted to challenge our clients. So we work in marketing and advertising, and our clients, they depend on us to find influencers that may talk about their hair products and different things like that. And some of their products are targeted towards Black American youth. So but our influencer programs are not representative. They're not 20% of the breakdown of our influencers. I would say it's more like 95% Hispanic, 5% Black. So that was something we said, hey, let's change that. Let's make that more of like at least 20%. So that's something we publicly put on that was a challenge for us, because, and that one's a little harder, but in a way, because we have to convince our clients. But I think it's our responsibility to reach out to them and tell them why they should do this. Because if we just let them do what they're most comfortable doing, things won't change. And I think and then the fourth one was we looked at how we refer to what we previously referred to as the African American. So basically we decided that African American, while it's not incorrect, we felt that after discussing with a number of our Black colleagues and reading about it, educating ourselves about it, that we should switch to Black community, Black audience, Black Americans, and usually it was how we do it in our software. But basically, with capital B, Black is the best way to go. Because we've been approached by a number of our colleagues that say, if you say African American, it says basically that there's some type of connection with the continent of Africa, and a lot of us don't actually feel that. And so technically, it's correct. I mean, it says it, a lot of census forms and all of that, but we want to use a term that is, I guess, more accepted, or more, I guess, that more people are comfortable with today. And also African American may alienate people that are from the Caribbean that happen to be of Black descent. So we felt that we changed our terminology. So in all of our future reports, we just started this I think we launched it in June, but all of our ongoing social research reports, all of them refer to the Black audience instead of the African American audience. And that's something that, over time, it's kind of, for us, and now it's like a duh, but like, I think, it's even those little things, just, how we think about it. Or can we put some more thought into, how we refer to people and all of those things. So those are some of the tips that, I have from what we've personally experienced, I guess, from our companies. Becky?
Yeah, ever since you and I had that conversation where you mentioned that you found that in your research and people have reached out to you, that the saying African American is not necessarily what the Black community is comfortable with or wants to hear. Been very conscious of that, and listening and just kind of seeing in media when I might hear the difference. I might hear African American, but then they also use the word Black community or Black Lives Matter or whatever, and how they're not necessarily synonymous. But since we talked about that, I've definitely been paying attention to that a little bit more. And I have more questions, but we're already at 6:37. So if anybody else has a question or a comment, if you want to jump in now, and if nobody does, I'll move on to what else I was thinking next.
Thank you, Eric, so much for this talk. I think it's so useful and so interesting. And I have tons of questions because I think your research is just very interesting, and there's some surprise nuggets in there that I think are really interesting. But the question that I really had was about, and you alluded to it, was about the question of intersectionality, right? I think that's something that we don't often talk a lot about when we talk about diversity and we talk about inclusion, but it's an incredibly important topic. So you talked about pet the threat, right? But this idea of intersecting identities that are often kind of suppressed identities. So I don't have a specific question, just more about what are your thoughts and where is that fitting in terms of the research and what you're seeing in terms of trends, because I think in the early days it was very easily clear Black Lives Matter, but now it's becoming very fractured, right? Black women's lives matter, Black, just all these kind of this intersectionality question. So I'll leave it at that and just want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, and I do appreciate that. With intersection, so let me tell you some of the things that I guess we've experienced. So we've had a couple conversations with some of our, I would say one of the biggest intersections would really be Afro-Latinas. Afro-Latinas, I mean, they're both. And it's like, how do they feel about this? So we actually for my nonprofit, we did a podcast where we talked specifically to a couple of our colleagues that work in the marketing world that are Afro-Latino. So they're basically, I believe they were both Dominican, and they lived in different parts of the country. I think one was living in New York, one was living in Washington State. And we asked them, simple questions, like things that we haven't really known and we weren't sure how to ask. We were like, how do you identify yourself? Do you identify yourself as Latino? Do you identify yourself as Black on census, or when people ask on any kind of paperwork, you have to do that? And basically the response is like, we identify as both. African, they identify it with Black. So when all this is going on, there can be a tendency among Hispanics. There's something that's, there's even a term for it in Spanish called mejorando la raza, which means like a whitening of the race. And basically, like, it's kind of an older expression, but you would even hear from your grandparents. Like if you were Colombian or Puerto Rican, and their ancestry is very mixed, Black, white, or like Tainos, like Native Americans that were on the islands when it was first inhabited by white settlers. But there's very much a mixing, and everybody's different, kind of like a different shade of brown. But mejorando la raza is like kind of like marrying somebody whiter than you so you can produce kids that are whiter than you, and all of that. So they talked in depth about that, and like how we're trying to get away from that, or like kind of trying to kill that that thought of like that whiter is not better. It's just different. We're all different, but we're all good people. And and literally that still happens. And like, I think part of it is and I've heard this from Black colleagues or Black friends that may not talk about these subjects as well as much, but where there's thoughts that like the efforts that are going to Black Lives Matter can take away from Latino lives, or Latino things that are going on in our communities. And and that's just one of those things that we just have to kibosh and really like just say that, like, basically, I mean, if you think about it this way, if we have this was mostly spurred, I mean, this was after George Floyd's murder, but if we have police that are basically protecting civil rights, and we're not worried about it getting killed, basically, that helps everybody. That helps, I mean, that's helped literally everybody, but definitely helps Latinos as well, because Latinos also in some cities, such as Phoenix, are killed by police, in ways that are questionable as well, just like the Black community in some of the more Black cities that we have in Phoenix as well. So like, basically, if we improve the situation for the Black community, it raises our ship as well. It helps us out too. So trying to spread that awareness, like, helping one side doesn't diminish what our cause is. I'll say one other thing on that. We actually had to fire one of our influencers because of the Black Lives Matter movement, and their reaction to it. And it was something that happened it was really just a lack of education. Like, they didn't actually understand what they were posting about. So basically what happened, they worked for one of our hair care brands, and they posted content about all lives matter, not realizing that when you post about all lives matter, it basically just diminishes the message that is Black Lives Matter, because Black Lives Matter is not saying other lives don't matter. It's saying that we're so far behind in Black Lives Matter. This is just the basic element. We have to express that Black Lives Matter, and that wasn't understood by one of our influencers. And by the time we tried to explain it to her, it was too late. We had to cut ties. But that's the type of thing that's like, I really have seen that there's still education that needs to be put out there. This person in particular, I don't think they meant it in a malicious way. It was actually somebody that was from a different country. How they explained it was that they don't have I'll do my air quotes, they don't have racism the way that we do in the United States. So they don't, necessarily see color the way we do. So that's why they felt that they could post All Lives Matter. But so it's that type of thing, because they're not from here, they don't know the history of this country, and the racial inequities have, come since, early 1600s. So they don't understand that. And that was something else that we have to do. And, I have to do, when I talk to my Latino colleagues, is like, hey, we're all in this together, and we have to spread that message.
Yeah, Carrie.
So I really liked your phrase about pet to threat, and I have seen companies who have a very intentional hiring for diversity, but then once people get in the company, just the way that the company culture is or whatever, there's a now you have to fit a mold. And so we lose the diverse voice. And so with these companies that are kind of putting out their numbers and maybe sharing some of their strategic thoughts on how they're going to get more diversity, what happens as it goes through the process if now everyone's funneled into that cookie cutter kind of thing, in order to progress in their careers within the company? Have you seen that, or is there talk about that?
Well, yeah, there is talk about, I want to say that, first of all, there's I guess two things I'll say. There's Blexit and there's Lexit, which is basically like kind of conservative Latinos and conservative Blacks that are basically not going with the majority. I want to say, like, I think it's like, I just saw stats yesterday, 30% of Latinos support Trump and 10% of the Black audience supports Trump. So there are definitely people that, and a lot of them tend to be from the upper economic, wealth areas. So if you think about, like, the Goya CEO, just like a couple weeks ago, came out and said it was very, very much publicized about his support of Trump, and that's something that led to the Goya boycott, and really just being, there's like, kind of fractional in that, this message is coming from somebody that, has the opportunity to be an inspirational Hispanic leader, putting his voice out there for the Black audience, the importance of this, and really not supporting those, and kind of going with the majority, and going with I guess just supporting Trump and all of that. So there's some of that I've seen that we basically need to, I guess, educate against. I think also, as far as, like, once somebody's in a company, to your question, Carrie, is like, so they're in there, and, like, it's like, okay, we gave you this job, now don't cause a mess, don't make a lot of noise, we're taking you, but we don't want you to cause a lot of problems, and so that's some of the things that I know folks very well that that have told me that a specific thing. It's like, they'll get you in, but you're kind of the exception. You were okay, but we don't know about trying to hire those other Black folks to get them up into, we don't know them, how can we trust them, and not being and not seeing that they're just people, just like us. And then I think, I want to say in the hiring world, it's really like, we all tend, I've looked at this, I've talked about this before, we tend to hire people that look like us, like, yeah, and I know that, and it's something that most of us are in that hiring world. If we are in, let's say, like a recruiting space, it's really our job. And I've heard this from recruiters, and I love this, that they'll actually challenge their clients by putting more diverse candidates in front of them, even when they don't ask. But they know it's like they should be, and they're basically trying to help them out. But the client may not necessarily know that, and they're like, why did I get some 30% diverse candidates? He's like, I never said I wanted that. But, like, we it's I think it's those little things that we can do, that, like, a little by little is going to make a difference into how can more the Black audience get into those higher levels of leadership.
All right, I'm going to jump in with one of my questions. And you may have already talked about some of these, but as far as good responses and not so great responses to the Black Lives Matter movement and how companies have been perceived on social media, maybe there have been some missteps. I don't know if you have any examples of some companies who have done better than others.
Yeah, I would say the couple things that stand out to me are, yeah, Starbucks at the beginning. I mean, they said that Black Lives Matter, they were in support, but then they were they were doing things like not allowing their employees to wear Black Lives Matter pins. I mean, I think that's something that they got called out for, and I'm pretty sure that they took that back, and that's not an issue anymore. But there's things like that. I would say that the biggest thing is companies, and most of them got called out early on this, was just putting their blackout on Twitter or Instagram without a plan, or without like, hey, here's our checkbox, we've done this. Or maybe even like, as much as I like the idea of giving the holiday on Juneteenth, I don't think that just doing that is like, hey, yeah, we're gonna give everybody a holiday. I don't think that's enough either. And there was companies that got called out for that. I would say the biggest misstep though is really Washington Redskins. I mean, they, for years they've been told that this is not the way. This is not. This is totally insensitive to a whole nation of people, and and then they finally had to get called out by FedEx by pulling their advertising dollars for breach of contract for them to actually make that change happen. So I think they're an extreme. I think it's hard to do as bad as the Washington Redskins have done. But and football is a weird world because somehow they're going to still have fans and all that, and they're in Washington D.C., which baffles me. But that's probably about as bad as you can get. I would just say in general, as far as the bad responses, is just like posting something but not having a plan. There's a lot of little things that I've seen, but nothing really significant enough. I've just basically, if you're going to put a plan out there, especially if you're a big company, you're going to have somebody. If you're a Starbucks or something like that, somebody's going to come out and say, well, you've had problems with hiring diverse employers in the past. So the stuff is going to come out, and you're just going to have to be okay with accepting that some of those things that you've done in the past that probably weren't that great towards civil rights are going to come out. But you're going to basically right now is the time you can clear the air. Everybody's doing it, and it's the easiest time to come out and come clean. I don't know why, and just don't do what the Redskins do, maybe, is like my best guidance on that.
And so Marjorie just typed in a question, which I'm going to read. So she says, with the return of Major League Baseball, they've tried to navigate showing support for Black Lives Matter while also trying to avoid players taking a knee during that national anthem. Do you feel that's a cop-out or an evolution?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say one thing about Major League Baseball. I was really impressed with, there was one post in particular. Let me share my screen for a second. I think I got it right here. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, I really liked some of the actions, and I'm not really a baseball fan, so I don't know a lot of the inner workings of what they're doing, but I did like this. This came up in my research. This just happened on Friday, I think. So today is opening day, which means it's a great day to arrest the killers of Breonna Taylor. Like, that was brilliant. Like, I thought that, as far as like, hey, this is much bigger than baseball, and we're gonna talk about that on opening day. Like, I never would have thought, and most people know that like Tampa is really not known for being I guess open to things like that, more of like a conservative town. So it was really interesting to me to see that, surprising really to see that come out. So I was very impressed by that from from Major League Baseball. With the anthem and all of that, I really think, personally, I think freedom of speech, if people want to kneel, I think they should be able to. I think, creating other ways that people can do that, I think, it's kind of just dodging the thing. If people want to kneel during the anthem, I think they should be able to kneel during the anthem. That's what I think.
All right, we've only got 7 minutes. That's crazy. Does anybody have any other questions? Because if not, I certainly have more. Comments, anything? All right, my turn. So if people at any position in their companies, like if we want to urge our companies into supporting the movement or being proactive or vocal about civil rights, what are some things you could suggest that people could encourage their companies to do? Like, is there one or two things that you think are pretty simple that we could try to encourage our organizations to take on, or what kind of suggestions do you have?
Yeah, one of the things I've liked that I've heard from my Black colleagues is really just started off with the town hall. I really think, and then you can't, here's the thing, you can't like force your Black employees or your diverse employees to be part of it, but say that you want to do it and you would, love if, put it out there and you're looking for volunteers, and hopefully you will get, I think that you're going to find people in this day and age that are going to be interested in being a part of it. And hopefully you will get some of the Black representations from your company as well. And even if you don't have any Black employees, I think there's still things that you can do. But I think just by starting and having that conversation, you're probably going to hear all kinds of great ideas. Like when we're a really small company, less than 10 people. And like when we talked about it, I found somebody on my team that was very passionate about it, and I had no idea. And she showed me the stuff that she had been talking about in some of her own conversations, and I was really impressed. And basically, once I learned that, I was like, hey, you know what? I want you to really help us and help guide our message with our blog, and coming up with our 4 initiatives of what we were going to do tangibly. And that was something that it wasn't even work to her, because it was something that she was passionate about already. So I would say start off with like just having that discussion, even if you set up a Zoom just like we're doing right now. And but it's not something we're just talking at them, right? You're just like kind of having a conversation. I'm sure there's a way to ice break and get that conversation flowing. That's probably the lowest, or probably the easiest thing I think you could do, and kind of just see where that conversation takes you as far as like what are the next steps, because hopefully at the end of that you can plan like, hey, who wants to be a part of doing something more with this, or taking this to the next level. Maybe there's something that you can do as far as like maybe it's meeting with high school kids, or they're from the Black community, or things like that. Any kind of idea is really good that is supportive of Black Lives Matter in general. And you could have like at the end of the session call to action as far as, or maybe like tally all the ideas and maybe figure out which ideas are going to have the most weight, are going to have the most, because probably there might be a lot of ideas, so you probably got to whittle them down and just get I don't want to say just the best ideas, but the ideas that are most actionable that you could actually really run with. That's something I would think of for any size company that they could do.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And so I know we've just got a few minutes, so so what I think is probably the best way to get your resources out there. I don't know if you have anything handy you want to put in the chat box, or you can send me that list and I can email everybody on the call along with a link to the recording. If you want to share all of the resources that you were talking about.
I do. Give me 1 second. I have a list of just like my top like 8, I think, resources. Let me find it. I'm going to post them right here. So I think they go away. I think I learned that the hard way when we were chatting earlier, Becky, that
that after you close it, the chat is gone forever.
Right, they're gone.
It is.
So let me I'm gonna put them right. I put them in okay. I put a lot of the my favorite articles. So I would say the top 2 are really the Ad Age one. It's just like it's a growing list of the most notable things that big brands are doing. So I think there's a lot to learn from those folks. Like your PayPal's are putting $500 million in there, and that focuses on the big ones. But I think there's a lot we can learn from them. I think Just Capital, that one's more of a dated one, where that one came end of June, but it was much more boiled down. So Ad Age, that one is really, really long, and to just be aware of that. It grows daily as there's more responses that come out. I put the link to what I shared on the screen, which is the O.Y.E analysis, and then sorry, I was trying to let me not share my screen. And then I put the Pet to Threat. There was a good article. I thought that was really, really interesting. I put a couple of the podcasts that we mentioned in the conversation. The 4 things that we're doing, I put in our Nativa. That's in our Nativa blog, how we support. I really like the Ben and Jerry's Justice Remixed. I think that was a great story. In addition to all the other stuff they're doing, and then the diverse suppliers. Now that's a very specific industry list for advertising and marketing. But I think if you look in your own respective industries, there's probably somebody putting together a diverse suppliers list within your industry. So I would look for somebody that's doing that there, and look, and that should help as well.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to save these. So if anybody doesn't get the chance, just let me know, and I will share those again as well. Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up. Does anybody have any other questions or anything, comments for Eric? Thank you, Eric, so very much. It is always a pleasure to hear from you. You always have these amazing insights. We can hear from you all the time. It would be great. So thank you so much for your time on this. And hopefully you'll come back and talk some more as things evolve. We'll see how things go.
Right. Yeah. Thank you, Becky, for the opportunity. And it was really nice meeting with all of you guys. So, please feel free to reach out if I can ever be of assistance in anything. So thank you guys.
Great. Thanks, everybody. All right. Hopefully I'll see some of you guys again, all of you at some point.
Yes. So good seeing you guys.
Yep,
Thank you.
good to see you. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Hi, everyone.